I'm Julie Kohler, host of the White Picket Fence podcast. If you've read the opinion section of any newspaper lately, you've probably come across think pieces panicking about falling marriage rates. They make sweeping claims that getting married will make you happier, healthier, and wealthier. Some even say that getting married is a way to stick it to the elites. I'm not so sure about that. This season on White Picket Fence, we're examining the current marriage panic. We'll go beyond the rosy sheen of love and commitment and expose the darker side to all of this marriage talk and explore what becomes possible when we broaden our imagination around what relationships can look like. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm A'shanti Gholar, the founder of the Brown Girl's Guide to Politics, and this is Season 5 of the podcast. I've already voted absentee. With Election Day tomorrow, we already know that we have something to celebrate with a record number of women who ran for office this year. But we also wanted to dive in to discuss how they were covered by the media.
Sexist, racist attacks and misinformation about Senator Kamala Harris started circulating within hours after Joe Biden announced that she would be his pick for a running mate. President Trump stoked a false conspiracy theory that she is not eligible to run for vice president. He also called her, quote, angry and a madwoman. Other critics have called her ambitious.
We know that the work to have more Black, brown, and Indigenous women in office does not end on Election Day. So how can we stay energized and keep moving forward and hold on to this momentum? We have seen, yet again, that all elections are important from Congress to school board, and our influence as women of color continues to grow every election cycle. Today, we interview Tina Tchen and Karen Finney. Tina serves as president and CEO of Time's Up Now and the Time's Up Foundation, overseeing the organization's strategic plans to change culture, companies, and laws in order to make work safe, fair, and dignified for women of all kinds. I had the pleasure of working with Tina in the Obama administration, where she served in many different roles, including assistant to President Barack Obama, the executive director of the White House Council on Women and Girls, and chief of staff to First Lady Michelle Obama. I am so honored to call Karen Finney a friend. Karen is a well-respected Democratic political consultant and was a spokesperson for Secretary Clinton's 2016 presidential campaign. She is a political commentator for MSNBC and hosted the show Disrupt with Karen Finney. I hope you enjoy this episode. And today I have two of the best political minds joining us. And today we're going to focus on Election Day. We are recording this 8 days out. It is so crazy to even say that. But we're going to talk to them about the election, what they think we'll see, what we've really seen with women this campaign cycle in particular. So we have to start in true BGG fashion with asking both of you, how did you get started in politics? Tina, let's start with you.
I got started in politics. Actually, the way I got started on especially women's equality politics was right out of college. I found myself, after I graduated from college, I got married to a guy from Chicago. That's how I got to Illinois. And working for state government in Springfield, Illinois in 1978, which was the year when we were trying to pass the Equal Rights Amendment. And Illinois was the hotbed of American feminism, if you can believe that. And so, I learned all about, marching and organizing protests, and we would stand in our green and white while the anti-forces were in their red and white, circling the rotunda of the state capitol building. Ellie Smeal was there and all sorts of folks. And here I was, a young 20-something, really just swept up in all of it. And that's how I got started. And from there, I never stopped, just working on gender equity issues, on democratic politics. When you live in Chicago, democratic politics is kind of like a full-time, full contact sport. So, always did that as part of my, work started a group called Cook County Democratic Women, which, was the first organization to support Jan Schakowsky running for office, who's now, an incredible congresswoman and one of our congressional leaders. And along the way, met a guy and his talented wife long enough ago that the three of us can't remember when we first met, which was, Barack Obama and Michelle Obama way, way, way back in the early days of his political career. And that,
Wow.
and then from there it went.
I love it. That's so fascinating. And with Karen, I met Karen when I had my first job in DC. In 2008, I was the assistant to the political director, and Karen was running the communications department. And I could tell immediately, I'm like, oh, this lady don't take no S. I'm not getting on Finney's bad side.
Well, that was with, and as much as I love Howard Dean, because this was at the DNC under Howard Dean, you kind of had to get in his face a little bit to try to.
So I would have to attend the morning communications meetings as a representative from the political department. And y'all, I would just sit there. I'm like, I'm just here to take notes, just pass the notes back to the political director, because Karen ran a tight ship.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, so for me, when I got out of college, I was working at a facility. It was in kind of downtown LA, Pasadena, and it was a minimum security facility for teenage girls. And these were girls who were incarcerated with their children because they were either pregnant or had very small children. And so as part of their deal, they were allowed to be in this residential facility, and part of it, there was a school as part of it. I loved it, but it was incredibly hard. And one of the things that made it so difficult was that a lot of these young women, had learning challenges that were related to, many of them had been sexually abused. They had been in gangs, and because this was at a time, this was the early 90s, when, we saw a real explosion and an understanding of gang culture in LA. I went to UCLA. And girls were, this was a big thing, right? That young women could be just as violent, frankly. What frustrated me was this facility would classify a lot of these young women as having learning disabilities that they didn't have, as a way to get more money. And I was really angry about that, because I felt like, these kids already have disadvantages, and to be listed as learning challenged or learning disabled, that's a whole other mark that at that time in particular was just going to set them back even farther. When you're 20, you're like, well, I'm going to do something about this. And so I went to work for Alan Cranston, who was one of the two senators of California back then. And because I decided I want to get in politics. And then Bill Clinton was running for president. And I heard him give a speech where he talked about gangs specifically. I felt like he really understood what I had seen, which was these weren't bad kids. These were kids who'd been raised in a really horrible situation. And so from there, I joined the Clinton campaign and went to the convention, ended up joining the campaign, and found myself on January 21st as a deputy press secretary for Hillary Clinton, working for one of the most amazing women, Maggie Williams, who was our chief of staff, and Hillary. And it was, I'll just say, and then I'll say the rest is history, but, working for a strong, amazing woman like Hillary, to be, 24 years old, and have a staff of all these amazing women, was so empowering. I feel so blessed to have had that experience early in my career, because I really never had seen that again, in terms of, such been part of a staff of so many really strong women. We had a couple of men, just to even it out, but it was just a phenomenal experience. And so from there, the rest is history in terms of my love of politics and belief that it is a form of service. I mean, it is a way to try to really affect change on the things that we know need to be changed.
Mm-hmm. And I feel, Jan, having that strong women's representation as a boss, Congresswoman Shelley Berkeley, she was my first boss, and I'm glad that she was, because it shaped just who I am, how I interact with people politically, with my colleagues so much, because I saw how Shelley interacted with people and that you could still be a strong woman and get things done. And we know this year we have lots of strong women running. A record breaking number of women are running for Congress. We have Senator Harris as a VP nominee, but we also know when women run, they have to experience the sexism, the misogyny, the racism. So, Karen, you've done a lot with Vote for Her and Win with Black Women. Tina Time's Up has done a lot of research around this. So let's talk about the work that your organizations are seeing this year and why it was important for you all to push back. And Karen, we'll start with you for this one.
Okay, sure. So as you may know, there was a group of Black women, some of that I was honored to be part of, with Donna Brazile, Mignon Moore, Star Jones, just a phenomenal group, Melanie Campbell, that got together, some of the leaders in politics and these powerful Black women, to press the case for a Black female vice president. Early on, we decided we weren't going to press for a specific candidate, but we really felt it was important, both behind the scenes with the Biden campaign and publicly, to be pushing and changing the narrative about the viability of a Black woman, because some of the initial reporting, as Tina knows so well, was a bit dismissive of the idea of a Black woman. And, Stacey Abrams was being criticized for being too bold in saying, yes, I would want that job, right? Which we would never say about a man. Yep. Of course. And we'd say, oh, of course, go on, bro, right? And we had the opportunity to, really engage with the campaign. And obviously we got a Black woman. But one of the things that was happening, also on the board of Ultraviolet, was a real recognition, and NARAL, frankly, that whoever this woman was going to be, she was going to need to have people were going to have her back, to quote Tina. And so, actually, and then that last week, right before the announcement, got so bad that a dear friend to many of us, Joteka Edie, just called a Zoom call. Like, she just emailed as many her friends, as she says, and said, invite other women. And we ended up with about 200 women on a Zoom call, and we agreed we're not going to let this happen. We're not going to, because the criticisms, what tends to happen with women is that the criticisms focus on personality traits, not policy or substance. And that's exactly what we were hearing. Oh, essentially they were saying she was too uppity, right? She rubs people the wrong way. She's this, she's that. And so from there, Win with Black Women, it just kept going. We meet every Sunday on Zoom, and we, social media, and, we've done a couple of open letters. We did a thing on what's at stake. Donald Trump said, what have you got to lose? So we did that. We try to do, and working with Vote for Her, which is another amazing project where, and Tina can help me on this one. I mean, I was approached by Hillary Rosen, but Tina and Hillary and Cecile and a whole group of women leaders got together and said, we're gonna make sure this time, because frankly we didn't have this in 2016, to create a structure to fight back on what we knew were going to be sexist, racist attacks. And so there again, meeting daily and focusing on what can we do on social media, what can we do publicly to push back, whether that is joint letters or talking with reporters, or really trying to change the narrative and to call out and be very prescriptive about why this is sexist and racist, for those who might not realize that just their language, right? And even because what we find is, it's a spectrum, right? This one end, it's Donald Trump saying we can't have a socialist woman president, which is just obscene. And some of the other, he tried to use the birther thing on Kamala again, as he did with President Obama, and we said no, we're not going to. He's still doing it, but we at least were able to shut it down or talk about it. And then the spectrum of, look, there are plenty of folks who say things that they don't realize are sexist or racist, and you have to call that out and say, misogyny much?
Right.
Oh my gosh, I want that on a shirt.
But, and also I think just the sisterhood of women and calling on women to use our power. And we have so much power in our voices, in our votes, and in our networks. And particularly in COVID, tapping into our networks is so important to say, hey, you got to go vote. You got to help call this thing out that just happened, and engaging women nationally. And it's been really exciting to see, and we got to figure out how we keep it going.
Imagine that our democracy is a dashboard. The way it's going right now, lights are flashing, alarms are blaring, warning us that it is time to check our systems. That's why I want to tell you about the latest podcast from The Nation called System Check. On System Check, host Melissa Harris Perry and Dorian Warren sit down to diagnose and repair our malfunctioning political system. System Check is a weekly show that asks, what would it be like to break free from the oppressive systems that are holding us down? And it's unapologetically rooted in progressive Black culture and politics. From the movement for Black lives to the fight for climate justice, from the unjust immigration regime to the unfinished voting rights struggle, Dorian and Melissa want to know, how are you living in, working around, smashing through, or recreating the systems that shape your life? System Check just launched, and by listening to the trailer, I can honestly tell you, I know I'm gonna be hooked. The banter between Melissa and Dorian on some of today's hottest topics is enjoyable, informative, and relatable. It's like having a great socially distant Saturday night dinner conversation with your friends. I know you'll enjoy System Check too. So don't wait. Subscribe to System Check on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your pods for new episodes every Friday. Tina, I want to talk about this fact. 25% of coverage of Kamala Harris referenced racist or sexist stereotypes, in large part because of coverage of how President Trump had characterized her. What else did you all see at Times Up with the coverage of not only Senator Harris, but women this election cycle?
No, absolutely. Well, what we started, was actually a nonpartisan effort at Times Up Now. So Vote for Her is a partisan effort that I do in my off hours. but at Times Up, we started, a nonpartisan effort through Times Up Now called We Have Her Back, right? To call out and watch for what's happening, not just in the VP race, but sort of down ballot as well in several key races, and also including Republican candidates like Joni Ernst or Susan Collins. And we actually have Edelman, Data and Intelligence, has been running like a war room for us, every day. So every morning we get a report from them about what happened both in mainstream media and in social media across the board. And sadly, what we predicted would happen did happen. Astonishingly, I tell this story a lot because it's so illustrative of what happens. We launched this, as Karen knows, on Friday, August 6th. We sent a memo saying we have her back from, across the board women leaders to newsrooms and editors, saying we were going to watch for this. Literally 24 hours later, the New York Times ran a Maureen Dowd piece that likened the Walter Mondale, Geraldine Ferraro moment as Geraldine Ferraro waiting for the wrist corsage to go to the prom with Walter Mondale. And then the LA Times ran an article.
I remember that.
Yeah. Same day, LA Times ran an article likening the VP race to The Bachelor and the Oval Office to the ultimate fantasy suite.
Oh.
I mean, that one just blew my mind. Right? I mean, on so many levels. And then, like Karen said, it continued from there. We tracked it. There was the birtherism. There was, more recently calling her a monster, calling her phony from the beginning. And remember, these are words that aren't sexualized per se. But when you call a Black woman who's running for vice president phony, you're just as a dog whistle to all the things that people believe. She's a phony because Black women don't belong in a position that high, right? It's the reason why I would submit we don't have a single Black woman Fortune 500 CEO right now, not a single one, because what happens in this kind of discourse seeps into every part of our culture, right? And it affects how we think about women leadership in all sorts of realms, not just in the political realm. And then to your point, A'shanti, on the data, Edelman did a report for us comparing the 2 weeks of coverage after Senator Harris was announced and comparing her to the Pence and Kaine moment from 4 years ago. And, we found that like in that 2 weeks, there were 11,000 online articles that used biased language about Senator Harris, reaching a potential 326 billion people, 21 million people actively engaged with that kind of stuff, like, actually, repeating it. And, what we found was, a quarter of it was blatant racist misogyny. 2/3 of the coverage just mentioned her race or her sex or her personal life in some fashion or another, as compared to 5% for Pence and Kaine. And that tells you two things. One, it tells you we have so normalized white men running for that office that we don't talk about it, right? When she runs, it's all of a sudden it occupies 2/3 of the coverage. And the second thing is, if we're spending 2/3 of the coverage on her personal life, her personal characteristics, her race, her gender, we are not talking about her issues. I mean, more people could probably tell you that she wears Converse sneakers than could tell you she was the state attorney general of California, right? And that's the double bind that, women candidates, are under, that they, are being called out for things that shouldn't matter in making a selection. And they don't get the chance to talk about the issues that really do matter. And finally, they can't call it out, right? It shouldn't be on the women candidates to call it out, because if they do, then they're whiny and they can't stand the heat in the kitchen. That's why we have to do it, right? So as we have to, as advocates, as activists, as women who care about women's leadership, we should take that on. And that's what we're trying to do, is constantly call it out. We got Peggy Noonan this weekend, like it's happening again. Her racist, sexist article. She's criticizing and saying, Kamala Harris is somehow not serious because she's dancing and, in her, enthusiastic in her campaign speeches. We got a president who is mocking people and dancing and, doing all sorts of things from the podium, with Air Force One behind him.
And is a super spreader. I mean, let's be honest. If you want to talk about seriousness in a pandemic, is discouraging people from doing the one thing all the scientists say is important, wearing a mask, right? So and Tina's so right. And this is such an important point because, by the way, she was it's not like she was dancing in the middle of a foreign policy speech. She was dancing right at a rally where you're trying to get people feeling good and excited, and so it's just, but this is the double bind that women face. And the Barbara Lee Family Foundation has done just some amazing research over the years looking at the challenges that women candidates have to face, as well as just to be taken seriously, and what are the things that you have to do to make sure as a female candidate that the way I liken it is that as a messenger that things don't get caught in the channel. So and so much of it is around likability, right? Likability.
Yep.
And you see people say it in focus groups, well, I just don't like her. But here's the thing. People will vote for a man that they don't like. If they think he's qualified. They won't vote for a woman if they don't like her. And likability is such a nebulous emotional decision that people make. In the research, people have tried to nail down, well, what does that really mean? It's everything from she didn't have the right earrings on, her hair, her outfit, her, she didn't smile enough, to maybe not liking something substantive. And so for these women candidates, think about that. All of that has to go into how you present yourself, just to be heard, just to be taken seriously. And for Black women, we know it's even more nefarious, because we've got all the racist dog whistles and tropes. And it's very intentional, the attacks that Trump and others have been making on Senator Harris, as Tina was pointing out, phony. It's also around, it tends to be around kind of the appropriateness of our behavior. And that's really what Peggy Noonan was doing, and saying, that's what the angry Black woman trope is all about, right? That you're out of control, that you're acting inappropriately, right? Versus, and once you get tagged with that, it is a way to just completely discount you and discount anything you say. And Trump is also trying, what we've also heard is a lot of trying to discount. I wrote a piece on this for the Daily Beast last week. With Black women in particular, it's their intelligence. Maxine Waters has a low IQ. That's absolutely not true, right? And going after Senator Harris for being unqualified. I mean, he did a speech where he said, she's not qualified. Ivanka Trump's qualified. My daughter's qualified, but she's not qualified. So this not qualified, these sort of, and again, it is about attacking their intelligence, legitimacy, credibility, and Tina knows the research better than I do. All of these things go towards just undermining the seriousness of, taking this woman, particularly a Black woman, a Latina woman, an Asian American, any woman of color, seriously, and discounting that you should be listening to what they have to say.
Well, and that's why we've got to call it out, because people don't even recognize they're doing it. I mean, you got Frank Bruni in the New York Times. He wrote a piece, shortly after Senator Harris was announced, talking about the fact that she didn't make him cry. Right? that was the way in which he was sort of disappointed, in her and her selection, because she didn't make him cry enough. I don't know when that was the criteria the last time we were thinking about a male candidate. So somebody who's even, thinks of himself as a progressive, people don't even recognize when they're doing it and when they're hearing it. And that's what's wrong, in our broader culture, right? And that's the point, that the toxicity of this expands not just in the political realm. It affects how we think about women in our own lives, or how, it goes down to I keep saying, this is like the restaurant server who thinks she might want to manage that restaurant someday. And whether the owner thinks she's capable of doing it, well, she's a Black woman and he's listening to all this stuff about Black women's leadership. It affects how he views her and how he judges her and her capacity and her capabilities for the future. And it really makes me crazy, because our kids, our young daughters, are watching this, and
sons,
and our
and
sons.
their boys.
It is shaping the future if we don't call it out. We don't change the culture.
Both of you are so right. We have to call it out. I remember I was doing an interview after Senator Harris was selected, and the reporter asked me, a woman reporter, so what do you think when people say she's not Black enough? And I responded, you have no idea how offensive that question is. And she said, excuse me? I said, that question is offensive. What is Senator Harris? She is smart. She is accomplished. She gets things done. She excites people. So when you're telling me, oh, people think she's not Black enough, what you're telling me is that you don't associate those qualities with Black women, that you have implicit bias about the way Black women should be. So Black women cannot be all of those things. She has to be what you think Black women are. And then she said, I'm never going to ask that question again. I said, you shouldn't. Thank you.
Good for you.
On.
A'shanti, that is exactly good for you. What we need to do is, and it's hard to do when you're in the moment, and Karen knows this because she sits on those panels on TV a lot. And, one of the things we need to have happen is calling it out in the moment, right? Don't let, that casual comment go by, on election night, on debate night, that people think they're trying to get a cute soundbite in, that'll go viral, right? We got to call that out right then when it happens. It's not cute. It's not funny. It's not, clever to go out and be clickbait for folks. It's it's damaging in exactly the way that you just said that. So that was fantastic.
I called our comms director afterwards. I said, so I don't think she's going to call me back again ever for an interview. But
well, shame on her if that's true, because you gave it straight and you gave it honest. You helped her learn something.
And I told our comms director, and she said, I can't believe she asked you that. You were absolutely right to do what you did. Like, our comms director was so upset. She's a white woman, and she's like, I would never even say that. I would never ask that. But it's what we have to do. So we know that this is a key election, but we know there's going to be a lot more elections down the road where we're going to have women running, and we need to stand up. We need to fight. We need to help them. So Tina, Karen, tell us, how can we stay involved with all the work that you're doing? We'll start with Tina.
So here's the thing. In the next, we're 8 days out. Everybody has to not take their foot off the pedal. Don't believe the polls that say everything's, going well for, candidates that you care about. We have to get out and vote. We have to make sure that we support people who are standing in long lines, because voter suppression is real and it is happening, and it is especially being directed at people of color and at women. You can see the neighborhoods where there's long lines, but we got to make sure people stand there and vote. Whatever hurdles we have to overcome in voter suppression right now are nothing compared to what our predecessors went through, right? So the women who fought for the vote, the Black leaders that we had who, John Lewis getting beat to a pulp, on the Edmund Pettus Bridge. So, in honor of all of them, we got to get out and vote. And then here's the other thing. I'll add one more thing, which is after Election Day, it is really important to keep this level of engagement up forever. This is not like a one-time thing. We don't all get to go home. Even if, we like the results on November 4th, we don't get to go home. Gloria Steinem, I learned from her, she said, the most dangerous time in progress moving forward is after you have a win, right? And she likened her example was after the Civil War, after emancipation. That's when lynching and Jim Crow came in, right? Because you let your guard down because you think you've won something. And all of a sudden, the backlash happens and the other forces come in. It's what happened to us in the Obama administration. After we won in 2009, everybody went home. They just figured he was going to fix it. We experienced this. He'll fix it. He's in the White House now. We can all sit back. And as a result, nobody shows up for the midterms and we lose the Congress 2 years later. We cannot let that happen. And that's not just at the federal level. One of the things that we have to get smarter about as progressives is, we got to go down the ballot. We got to fight next year in the off-cycle governor races, like in Virginia. We've got to be in the state house races. We've got to be in the midterms. We have got to keep this level of activity up now for the long haul, because that's what we're in for. We don't have the federal courts anymore. And we could go off on Amy Coney Barrett too, but we do not have the federal courts as a vehicle for change anymore, right? So we're going to have to make that change.
That's a podcast conversation in itself.
Absolutely.
Amen.
Yeah.
Because if they take our health care away, that's right. And I think reminding people over and over again that what's at stake isn't just at stake in this election. They're always trying to take these things away, right? They're always trying to fight these things. I mean, think about how unrelenting they have been on trying to repeal the Affordable Care Act. And I have to tell you, I was so happy to see Barack Obama on the campaign trail. It just made me feel better.
Always. You're like, Dad's home. Dad's home.
Yeah, it's like, oh, thank God. Oh, right? And I love that he is just telling it plain, laying it out.
You can tell when he's right. The whole Chinese bank account. He is loving that riff.
Oh yes,
my gosh.
you could. And that was wonderful to see. But one of as he pointed out, they've been saying they're going to repeal and replace and talk about the replace for 4 years. And where is it? So, and it's because Democrats have fought tooth and nail day after day that they haven't been able to repeal health care. And I think it's important that we also remind people that the work is ongoing. I mean, one of the things, I'm doing some work for the Congressional Black Caucus, and one of the challenges we see in some of these down ballot races is that some voters don't know what Democrats in Congress have been fighting for. They may not know what Democrats in their state legislature have been doing. So I completely agree with Tina that, yes, for the next 8 days, we gotta fight with everything we've got, remind people to vote, if you can vote early, make a plan, right? If you can't go early and you can't mail it in early or drop it off in a ballot box, then make the time, go stand in line if you can. And I understand that for a lot of working folks, that is hard. That is a hard ask. But we need you because your voices matter the most, because we need everybody out there voting, and we're going to vote for the things that affect our lives, right? So, and again, reminding us what is at stake. If you want criminal justice reform, real criminal justice reform, by the way, Trump is very duplicitous when he talks about that. If you care about the environment, your health care, the economy, a real plan for COVID, for heaven's sakes. I mean, it's just absurd what is happening around COVID. So reminding people why we're voting is really important. And then, as Tina said, you got to stay engaged. And I think one of the other things, A'shanti, I'll say that's so important is remember that, voting is our power. And part of that power also means after we elect people, we get to ask for the receipts to say, have you done what I voted you in to do? Let me see the proof, right? That's our right. And so that's to my mind, that's part of what it means to stay engaged, is to stay engaged in the fight. Make sure people are doing what they're supposed to do, because if they're not, then we might have to make some changes as we go along. And just reminding ourselves that it is not a one-day activity. It is about, staying engaged throughout the process to make sure that we continue to make progress on the things that we care about. And if we don't, let's try to understand why and what can we do about it. And I think you were just reminding ourselves we have more power than we realize.
Absolutely. When we were on one of our Win with Black Women calls, Mignon Moore said, voting is not an event, it's a lifestyle. And I said, that is so true. Tina, Karen, thank you so much. I need to have both of you back on because we have so much more to talk about.
I'd love to come back.
That would be so fun. Fun to be with you guys.
Oh, thank you both for your time. And everyone, hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you so much for listening. Please take time to rate and review wherever you listen to your pods. For more information on the Brown Girls Guide to Politics, you can check us out at www.thebgguide.com and on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at The BG Guide. The Brown Girls Guide to Politics podcast is produced by Wonder Media Network. You can find them at wondermedianetwork.com. Until next time, Brown Girls.